The ultimate question, as far as we're concerned, is what can the City of Regina provide the service for, and what can the private sector provide the service for? An apples to apples comparison. If we could actually ask and answer that question and have all of the pertinent information, we would be able to have an informed discussion. We are less concerned about who provides the service and far more concerned about value for public dollars.
How I understand it is, if we proceed without a benchmark, then 100% it will be provided by private sector. Is that correct? Through you, please, Mr. Mayor.
Wandzura? Your Worship, if there's a compliant bidder and it meets all the terms and specifications of our request for proposal, yes, we would be. We have a duty to award to a compliant bidder.
Okay. If we proceed with a benchmark and none of the bids are below that benchmark, I thought it then went to the city. Please help me with that, through you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Wandzura? Your Worship, if you issue with the benchmark and all the bidders come in above the benchmark, they would be deemed non-compliant. What that is, if you have no compliant bidders, then as Mr. Wary said, you're sort of back to the drawing board. You either decide to retender or change the specifications, retender, or do something different, but it does not automatically default anywhere.
Okay, if there are no compliant bidders and we have a benchmark and it comes back to us, at that point, do we then have the option of having the city do it in-house? Through you, please, Mr. Mayor.
Your Worship, sir, that would be a decision of council at the time. If no bidders were compliant and it came back to rethinking how to deliver the service, certainly that would be an option to consider.
Okay, thanks for that, and that is what I understood all along. Speaking to Councillor Clipsham's amendment to reintroduce the benchmark, I'm speaking in favor of it. This journey started many years ago with Waste Plan Regina, and that included a great deal of public consultations. Now, earlier this year, our administration brought forward recommendations to provide this service in-house. Now, only speaking for myself, since I did not know what the private sector could provide at that time, I didn't feel I was in a position to assure my citizens that we are providing the best value for our tax dollars.
Councillor Browne, I just want to remind you that you have 3 minutes on an amendment, not 5.
Okay.
Thank you.
And that's what, thank you, Your Worship. That's what I'm interested in. Not driven by an anti-union or pro-union bias. I'm not driven by an anti-business or pro-business bias. I simply want the best value for tax dollars. Now, in some communities, the city can bid on its own projects. That's what the delegation from the chamber was talking about. In other words, the city can compete for its own projects whereby a separate department within a city would submit a fully costed proposal which would contractually bind that city in the event it wins that proposal, and that's called managed competition. And in an ideal world, I agree, that is what would determine the best value for tax dollars. However, it's complicated. For example, how would we value the space at City Hall which our public works staff occupies? Or what about those public works staff that are working on that project? What percent of our power bill would we include in such a tender, or our water bill or IT support, et cetera, et cetera? Without defensible answers to these sorts of questions, our tender could be open to attack according to the laws of contract generally and of tendering specifically. Suffice it to say, we're not in a position to have a managed competition. A request for proposals will provide us with the answer as to what the private sector can do, but that alone does not necessarily provide us with the best value for our tax dollars. The benchmark represents an ad hoc bid by the city. It may not be as accurate as the number would be in a managed competition scenario, but it's our administration's best estimate based on an analysis from other cities and considering local factors. And under the circumstances, it's the best that we can do to estimate what it would cost to provide the service in-house without actually providing the service ourselves. So to benchmark or not to benchmark, that is the question.
A number of municipalities have had difficulties with private companies and brought garbage and recycling back in-house. Port Moody, British Columbia brought its garbage and recycling back in-house in 2008 after dissatisfaction with the contractor. Just recently, St. John's, New Brunswick voted this month to take garbage collection back in-house and save $500,000 a year. Once a public service is contracted out, the municipality loses control over the cost of the service. A 2003 City of Toronto report analyzed the per ton cost of in-house and contracted garbage collection. It found that the per ton cost of private contracted garbage increased at a rate of 13% per year, twice that of in-house garbage collection. Taxpayers pay private sector profit margins. When a public service is contracted out, taxpayers end up paying more than the real cost to deliver the service because private contractors build in a profit margin. In many cases, the contract may include long-term capital investments as well. It makes no sense for taxpayers to pay for those profits and those capital assets of a private contractor when city employees can do the job for the basic cost of delivering the service. An aggressive waste diversion recycling program publicly delivered by the city will reduce waste collection, and landfill costs. We could also look at other opportunities, contracting in the small vehicle transfer station at the landfill. The trucks used for this work can also provide the blue bin recycling work. Our local estimated that we could have had some potential savings up to $10 million in the last 10 years if we would have had that work in-house. Conclusion. The City of Regina is one of the last cities in Canada to provide curbside recycling to its residents. We congratulate City Council for moving in this direction. This is a critical moment. We shouldn't make the same mistakes that other municipalities have made. All the information is there for us. All we need to do is gather it and review it. It's important that City Council make this decision to implement the best delivery model possible. We strongly believe that the best model is a public delivery model. When first introducing a service, it's critical that the city be flexible and be able to work out any problems as they arise. This can only happen under a public service delivery model. We urge you not to tie the hands of future city councils by opting for private delivery. I want to thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Anderson. Are there any questions? Councillor Clipsham.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Mr. Anderson, for the presentation. So in the report that we considered at Executive Committee, and it's unfortunate that you didn't make a presentation at that time, but the discussion was about the idea that there's some benchmark rate which would represent, through the calculations of our staff, what it would cost our city staff to do the recycling pickup service. And the decision at that Executive Committee meeting was to remove reference from the benchmark from the report, which means that it's going to go to the private sector. So are you favoring or recommending then that we put some benchmark rate back into the recommendations?
Well, Councillor Clipsham, I'm not sure what the process is, but reading administration's report to Executive Council, I think that they even recommended that we keep the service in-house. So I think that there's enough information out there that we can do the comparisons, and I'm positive that our members, your employees, can deliver that service more cost effectively and efficiently. We've been doing it for well over 75 years, every day, every week, every month, every year.
So I guess I'm confused by what the administration tells us. They tell us that they can't calculate benchmark. They can't calculate the cost that it would cost our city staff to do this service. Well, and you're saying, well, for example, you say it'll take 3 new trucks.
Right.
So I'm assuming a driver and an operator, 6 more staff, or something in that neighborhood, maybe with shifts and whatnot, maybe, what, 8 staff? Or?
Well, I certainly think there would be a capital cost to buying the equipment, $300,000 per truck, and then X number of $1 million to get the carts. I believe that there are some economic opportunity in terms of packaging up some contracting out services that you guys already do in terms of the big blue recycling bin, the small vehicle transfer station at the landfill. I mean, I always believe that it should, any type of fee should come out of general revenue, but I mean, if push comes to shove, I would suggest that, you put garbage in a utility and you give recycling free and you charge people on the amount of garbage that they, that they take away. That would force people to recycle more.
Lost that fight, didn't we? That's not a question. But it is, I guess, a question. I know what the answer is. So the question I asked you, I didn't get an answer for. 6, 8, 10, 12 staff for recycling, how many?
Well, I would assume if there's 3 trucks, and if you worked in probably at least 3 to 4 employees, I mean, whatever an Op 3 would make, I imagine around $22, $24 an hour plus 20% for benefits. That would be your cost, which would actually, when you look at the private sector, they need a profit margin. Councillor Clipsham, they don't do this for free, and they don't do this in the best interest of public service. They're there to make a profit. That profit is usually 20 to 30%.
So you think that the union would be in a position to help calculate the benchmark cost? Do you?
Well, we've asked the city for information on a number of issues when we want to calculate overhead and benchmarking, and we haven't gotten that information. So either they don't want to give it to us or they can't give it to us. But I can tell you, if you open this up to request for proposals and you contract it out, when you find that the costs are higher, your hands are going to be tied and you won't be able to bring that back in-house. And that's going to be the reality of it. This is a new program. We need to see how it's going to work. We need to see how it's going to evolve. And I firmly believe that our members, your employees, can deliver that service more cost effectively and efficiently over the long haul.
We've got a very skilled and experienced workforce that has been doing essentially what the tender is going to provide. So why not utilize the expertise of our employees in the assessment of the tenders received by the city by formally comparing their knowledge, skills, and costs against the tenders of the private sector. By taking out the benchmark, this council is saying to the workers that have been doing for decades, providing excellent service, that their services are no longer necessary, and we've agreed to privatize their jobs. And fifthly, this option will undoubtedly cost the citizens of Regina more money than doing it in-house and by civic employees. The cost to the taxpayer, as I see it, is made up of the salaries of the employees, the type and extent of the services provided, and the overhead to implement the program. With a privatized program, a margin of profit will have to be factored into the equation. And if the costs are the same, something has to give. So either the salaries will be lower, the services will be of a poorer quality, or the overhead will be smaller. The best option, I will assert here tonight, is to have the city own and operate the program as a utility and not to privatize or tender the service at all.
We are the public service. We collect taxes to do public good. Sanitation is part of that good, okay. In Mr. Elliott's world, a continuation of that sanitation service is the recycling service. And it is. I mean, if we don't recycle, we're filling up the landfill and we're creating more landfills and et cetera. So we do have to consider this. So this business of influencing the marketplace, I can understand if we're not going to go with a benchmark, don't let the cat out of the bag. But putting a benchmark in gives us, at the end of the day, the best value for taxpayers' dollars. It gives us, at the end of the day, the concrete knowledge yet that there are two compliant bidders and one has got a lower price than the other, so we go with that one, or there are no compliant bidders, and we can come to the point that Councillor Browne was taking us to, that we can then, at that time, say, okay, the best value for the taxpayer is to do it with an in-house service. The way we're headed with the unamended recommendation, we will never know what's the best value for the taxpayer dollar. Like Councillor Browne, I am not trying to be ideological about this. I just want to know the answer. Let's compare, Hopkins' words, apples to apples. Let's have that number, put it in there, and let the best company or the best union win. The ultimate question, as far as we are concerned, is what can the city of Regina provide the service for, and what can the private sector provide the service for, an apples to apples comparison. Now I know that we go to an RFP to ask the private sector what they can provide the service for, but I'm asking our staff, what can we provide the service for?
Mr. Wandzura?
The number that we've calculated through the provision, or through our cross-county investigations and with the assistance of Grant Thornton Business Advisory Services, is about $98 per household per year for that entire, those three pieces. That's net of the MMRP, but that's the number that we shared with Council last April. For the purposes of our RFP, we've broken that down into three distinct pieces: one collection, one the ancillary pieces, customer relationship management, contract management, and third, the materials recycling. So we have those figures. We're highly confident in them, although until the RFP is released, our advice would be not to release those to unduly influence the marketplace.